Hello and welcome to Hop Along Studio. In today's video, I want to share with you how you can turn these clear glass or plastic ornaments into these beautiful alcohol ink ornaments. There's a few steps to do this, and there's other videos out there about that, but today I want to share with you not just the steps for creating one of these beautiful ornaments, but also how to troubleshoot when things don't go quite according to plan. So let's get started. So let's start by talking about our materials. First of all, I have both glass and plastic bulbs. The difference between these two is the plastic ones have a bit of a seam on them, and they work very similarly to the glass ones when you're actually using them with alcohol ink. So it's really kind of whatever preference you have and what you're looking for. If the seam bothers you, go with the glass ones. So the first thing you want to do is take out the little centerpiece in each of these ornaments and have maybe a little cup. This is probably the easiest way to handle it, where you can put them in so that they don't roll. The little cups that I'm using today were from my aquarium plants. So I've had these for a while. I just held on to them because I found them quite useful for this kind of stuff. So you might notice today that I'm wearing gloves as I work. I tend to have very irritated skin from the alcohol inks, so it's not everyone's problem, but it's definitely one that I run into, so I'm wearing gloves. It's totally a personal preference. You can easily get the alcohol inks off your hands by just using some rubbing alcohol or some hand sanitizer. Anything alcohol-based will help remove some of it from your skin, but it will stain your hands, so just be aware of that before you start working. The first thing you want to think about is which colors you want to use. There's a lot of colors available, but you want to think about trying not to create mud as you're creating these bulbs. And so you can do that by sticking to either more cooler colors or more warmer colors, or even thinking about the color wheel, like red and yellow make orange, blue and red make purple. So when you look at it from that perspective, that can allow you to get some interesting mixes, but it also prevents you from creating mud when you're trying to create this project. And so I'm going to start with the Ranger Boysenberry ink. And you want to start by just adding a tip a little bit in, and then just let it go. And you'll notice you'll get a really nice line there, but that line will continue to expand a little bit as you add alcohol in. So it's something to be aware of. And if you find you're not getting quite as far down as you want, just add another drop. I find the key to these is patience. It's easy to be like, I'm just going to add 5 or 6 drops, and then the problem is then it starts pooling at the bottom. And I'll get into that a little bit more later about just how bad it can get pooling and how it can affect the final look of your ornament. You can see that you end up having some nice color, and now I'm going to add a couple more going the other direction. I like this boysenberry color because it does have that bit of that warmer pink hue to the purple. Instead of being a cool purple, it's a little bit more of a warm purple. And so this is where we have to make a decision. If you want the really strong lines, you need to dry it at this point in time. The reason I'm bringing that up is I've created bulbs like this. And this bulb is beautiful because it has all of the very strong lines. It looks very cool. I love the look of it. But this one looked exactly the same when I added the ink, but then once it dried, this turned into this. And so this is where I really want to talk about the steps you need to take. It's nice to go, oh, I'm going to add all these colors, it's going to look beautiful, it's going to look great, but then what you run into is that as the ink settles, it will start running all to the bottom. And so all those super deep colors that you have at the top, 3/4 of the ink will flow down, and that's it. It's all at the bottom. And then the question is, do you mix it over and do something like this, or do you let it dry for 5 days till it finally dries all that ink? But you're also going to always have that dark spot at the bottom. So it's something to think about process and about what you're wanting from this project when you're working on these ornaments. So even here, it's hard to see on camera. I don't think it's actually very easy to see on camera, but I actually do have a tiny bit of pooling on the bottom. And you can even see that as it's dried, it has started to get thicker. And that's not a problem. It depends on the look that you're looking for. If you want it to be thicker, that's great. But if you want a bunch of thin, really detailed lines, then you're going to have to do a few more steps to try to get it that way. So at this point, what I would do is just take a bulb of some sort. This one's the bulb for cleaning my camera that I have started using just for doing art stuff. And just run your bulb around it. What I've noticed with this is between the glass being a bit more slippery you're going to find that the ink is going to tend to settle where gravity is putting it. So if you have it this way, it's all going to settle along here. If you have it down here, it's going to settle down at the bottom. It doesn't dry nearly as quickly as it does on Yupo and a lot of other things. So it's something to think about when you're trying to create one of these bulbs. And you might have noticed I only did one drop for each area, and that's what I got. It's one thing to think about is how much ink do you want in there, because how much ink you put in will also depend on how many layers you end up with long term. And so I'm gonna try doing some purple and some teal together. And this may or may not work out, because teal has a little bit of like that blue-green going on, so green and purple may not totally work together, but because I've actually let that fully dry, it might be okay. And these piñata ones are a little bit stronger in color as well than the Ranger. Again, I'm just going to drop those in. Just going to let those settle. As you can see, as I was moving the bulb around, I was getting a little bit of a different look to it. And now if you want to try to keep these lines the way they are, you're going to want to dry them again. It's actually a fair amount of ink now pooling in the bottom. It's hard to tell, again, on the camera. I thought I would try a different angle today because I did actually want to try to show you how to fill it and turn it and move it, which I thought might not work as well on my overhead camera, which is why I'm doing this video from my kitchen. Eventually I will have a studio set up in my basement, and then in that case I can start doing some more fun camera angles. Until then, I'm kind of working with what I got. I'll try to pull that up to the camera. So you can see along the bottom, there's a lot of just darker areas. And then as you bring them along the side, you will notice that this is not totally even. It would be nice to have it totally even, but that's not the way alcohol ink works. So this is where the fun kind of comes with it. So now I've added some teal, I've added some purple, so now I want to add some more blues and a little bit more purple colors just to try to play around a little bit with color on this. So I'm going to go with this villainous color. This actually has glitter in it. And another thing I would suggest with these is go with darker colors when you're choosing your colors for these bulbs. And what you'll also notice is sometimes when you drop it in, it's going to try to flow where the last set of ink went, which is not a bad thing, but if you're trying to fill in those gaps, it doesn't always work according to plan. But that's okay. And now I have some sitting in the bottom. And this is where I have a choice. I can start moving some of this up the sides a little bit for a different look. But thankfully, just because I am drying in between each coat, we're not ending up with a ton of stuff sitting at the bottom. What you'll notice even after we finish this bulb is that there's going to be a bunch sitting at the bottom. It's, no matter how much you dry it in between, it seems like unless you get it perfectly dry between each layer, you're going to have a little bit of color that just kind of ends up seeping to the bottom, which means that it's pulling off the sides into the bottom of the bulb. So it's something to be really aware of when you're working on these. So now I've added I've added a few different purples. I'm now going to add another blue. And I'm going to use this Baja Blue by Piñata. And I'm going to be using, I think I want to add some silver to this. So I'm going to add some silver mixative. So this is where we need to be aware of what mixatives and pearls are. So the alcohol pearl villainous that I use already has the mica mixed in. For the mixatives do need to be mixed with another color. So this is where I'm going to have some fun playing around with adding color. I want to add a little bit of the Baja Blue, so just a drop, and I'm going to put in the mixative right after it. And what that does, it allows them to mix together, so you end up with a really great color. And if you find it's too silver, just add a little bit more blue. And you can choose if you want it to go up the other side. And that's a way that you can add some color. And because I didn't meet up all the way, I ended up kind of bringing it back over. And let's try this again on another side. Oh, now you can see because I brought it up, now it started to come down on its own, and this one has decided to take a direction of its own on the bulb. And that's just the nature of the alcohol inks. It's not going to stay completely in one place. Instead, it's going to wander a bit on you, even if you don't really want it to. And so you need to be really loose with this, and don't expect the perfect placement of every color. And then what I'm going to do now is just, again, blow the bulb with the blower. And at the bottom, actually, you'll notice it's getting a little bit one color, just because of the fact that when you are moving it at the bottom to try to dry off some of the stuff, it is going to kind of take on a life of its own. But I think that one's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the results on that. I think it's a good color combination. And even as you can see here, some areas here are probably going to drip a little bit. I'm okay with that. I actually want this to drip a little bit and just allow it to kind of do its own thing for this bulb. So what if you want a little bit more marbly effect? Now we're moving to our plastic bulb. And one thing to make sure that you do is make sure you're using a blower like this and not a heat gun when you're working on the plastic bulbs. One of my plastic bulbs that I did, I actually melted part of the outside by trying to heat set it because I had too much alcohol in it. The blower wasn't working very well and I got impatient. So something to watch for. This needs to be one of those projects that you add a little bit of ink, maybe you have a little bit of your favorite beverage, you blow it with the blower, let it dry out, do its thing, then move on to the next step and not be in a rush. To get these beautiful results takes time, and just enjoy the process. Enjoy the beautiful ornaments that you're making. Do this with a friend. Have some fun with it. Definitely don't rush the process. So let's try adding some red. Let's try to do maybe a little bit more of a marbled effect here. So I'm going to show you maybe a little bit of a different way of going about it. I did try this earlier. I didn't get really great results with it, but I'm going to just show it to you as an option. You can use 99% alcohol and just squeeze a little bit in there, swirl it around, because that's going to give you a little bit of a different feel because it's going to move a little bit differently. So now that I'm going to add in some of the poppy field color, it's going to add it into the alcohol ink. And now you're seeing that it's swirling differently. It's moving way more loosely than it normally would, just because of the fact that you are using some alcohol to help it kind of move a bit more. And I would still suggest, because again, even though it is moving about and you've almost covered the entire bulb with stuff, I would suggest use your blower and just dry off the ink as well. I love this Baja blue because it is so incredibly vibrant. It's like such a vibrant blue. That's another thing I would suggest with these, is if you are going to be choosing colors, choose colors that have a lot of vibrancy to them. So this is where we can go in a different direction with this. We can let things flow. This is probably where you could almost even start doing some really interesting stuff to get little scenes and other things. A completely different look. And I would still suggest that you dry between each layer. Let's just do another one in the other direction. Because what I found, I was so disappointed. I'd spent an afternoon doing a bunch of ornaments going, this is such a cool technique and I'm so excited to share it with you guys. And then I came back the next day and I went, what happened to all my ornaments? It was so frustrating. Most of the patterns most of them did this. It was, and this is not bad. I do like this one, but I'll be honest, I really like the level of detail and character that some of these ones have, and losing that out of some of my ornaments, I was very disappointed. And so it's one of those things to really think about when you're working on these, is like, what are you looking to get and how is it important to you to get a certain effect? And now even as I'm putting the blower in there and drawing it out, you can see it's even changing how it's reacting on the edges. So you can see on the one side, I have almost, it looks a little bit more solid with some gaps. This area is a little bit more open. You can see a little bit more of the red. This is where it's really fun because you can kind of go back and forth with this. You could add in more red in places. You could add in a lot of different hues. And I always try to mix it up with the colors. I'm going to add some crimson now. Why stick with just two colors when you could maybe stick with two colors and stick with all the shades within those colors? There's some really fun places you can take this. And there I've added some red, and I think I'm going to go back in and add some more gold. I really am enjoying how the mixatives are looking with these bulbs. And you can shake them, you can move them, you could probably even add, because even here you can see where now that I have added in the red and the gold, now the gold is separating from the red, which is really interesting. It's never done that before for me. So again, there's so many ways you can take this and change it and make them lovely. But I think if you want the really strong lines, you just don't want the just straight, more just flat effect, you really do need to draw between those layers. And I'm just trying to decide if I want to put two more lines in here. Try to make them a little bit more subtle. I try to balance these out. I like actually having like 4 of something and another 4 of something, and I like adding the stripes. And maybe that's a bit too much stripe, but the other option is now I can take the stripe and before it hits the bottom, start moving it around. It just takes a little bit of time to let these inks move, to see what they will move and what they will do. And this is why it's important to have it over a cup, because if you have too much of anything, then you can just kind of let it run out. And so just again, you want to make sure you dry that really, really, really well. And you might notice that as you even add the blower inside, you start getting the fumes from the alcohol ink. Another nice thing about doing it this way is that the alcohol ink fumes stay mostly in the inside of the ornaments, so you don't necessarily get gassed nearly as badly as with some alcohol inks. And I would say make sure you're in a well-ventilated room or in a large room like I am here. And that's part of the reason I did this downstairs in my kitchen instead of my little studio, because it's about -20 outside and I didn't really want to open the window at -20, try to get some fresh air in. And so it's something to think about. Either work in small sessions with these things or try to find some good ventilation. It'll prevent you from not feeling well in an hour or so, because I do tend to get headaches if I get too much of the alcohol ink. You can leave them like this. I like how these look. I love the colors. I love the feel of these. But also, you can look at maybe adding some white paint in them if you would like them to have a different fill. Like these ones look really great if you just want the light to go through them on a Christmas tree. But let's say you want something that is a little bit more solid. I found with a few of these ones, especially like ones like this, I ended up running into, it doesn't have a lot of really strong color. So what I'm going to show you is how you can add paint inside. I originally tried this using titanium white high flow paint, and it's highly pigmented. It's great, it works well, but right now I'm going to try some gesso. What I found is that when I was working with the paint, a lot of it was coming off again. My hope is by doing it this way, because the gesso is meant to be on surfaces to add tooth, so it works really well on really slippery surfaces. So my hope is that with the glass and the plastic, the slippery surface will work a little bit better by using gesso. It's quite a bit thicker though. So the question is, how much gesso do you want to add in here to try to get it to flow? And so this is a way you could add in glitter. You could add in some adhesive and get some glitter going in here. You could add some white paint to help the colors work a little bit more strongly. There is more than one option to this. So I'm finding this thing isn't flowing as well as I was hoping. So we're just going to work by adding a little bit of high flow paint and see if that helps a bit. You could also look at watering down your paint. That would help with this as well. You want to try to look down into the bulb and try to make sure that you are covering the entire surface. And you will be able to tell from the outside where the paint has fallen. Because there'll be areas, I'm not sure if you can see on the camera, there's areas here that you can tell hasn't gotten all of the white in. Instead, what you have here is you have all those little white areas, and then that area doesn't show any white at all. And my suggestion to you is to leave this upside down. So you notice now I've run into is that now the full thing is covered. It actually has all of that color that wasn't really showing through very well. It was a little bit boring, and now you can see all of the tiny little layers of color. So on some of these bulbs that maybe you're having a hard time getting like really intense color on, it's a great way of just helping it along to get that more intense color. And I think this one is mostly dry, so I'm also going to try this one as well. And actually this wasn't fully dry, so I will try to make quick work of this, because now what I'm finding is now with the colors from the inside of the bulb, it's picking up some of the ink. And this is why you should really let this stuff dry for 24 hours before adding any paint. But I was being impatient. I kind of wanted to show you how this would work, so we will see what results we get. If you look into the cup, you'll notice that it's not white. It actually has a little bit of alcohol ink flakes. It has some pink color. It shows that the bulb was not fully cured before I started adding in the white paint. So it's really important that you give this stuff maybe a day to dry out, and that's a much better way of doing this so that you end up with really strong color and really strong white. But you can even see with this one, you have a much more marbled effect. It's more opaque than transparent compared to the one that we did here, but it's two completely different looks. So depending on what you're looking to do, you can end up with two very different types of ornaments. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, that maybe this is giving you some tips and tricks for how to move past some of those times when you're really struggling with how to make these ornaments look exactly the way you would like them to. And if you enjoyed this video, if you could like it, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification button. And I'd love to see your comments. So I hope you have a really great week, and I will see you next time.